Welcome back to the Dean Obeidallah Show. Right now, very happy to welcome back Glenn Kirschner to the show, former 30-year federal prosecutor. You see him on MSNBC and NBC News all the time. He served in the U.S. Army in JAG Corps, and of course, is the wildly popular YouTube channel Justice Matters with Glenn Kirschner. Glenn, welcome back.
Hey, good to be with you, Dean.
Don't give up on justice, Glenn. It's coming. It's gotta. I don't know. Please. It's so funny to be almost there are times when both of us, probably you live it more than I do. I get angry. I'm like, are you kidding me? This is how so let's talk about some of the developments. So we learned yesterday that Trump's lawyers, a second group of lawyers, not the original ones with the Mar-a-Lago documents, actually hired people to look for the documents, which is probably a good thing to do. They should have done a long time ago, the other lawyers. And they found at least now two more classified documents at a storage facility in West Palm Beach. These are classified documents mixed in with wrestling belts, and suits and stuff. I know you did a whole video on it, but please share a little your view on this.
You know, it shouldn't be that the guy that stole the documents hires people to find the documents. That's not the way any of this is supposed to work. It is very much like law enforcement saying to the bank robber, hey, can you just do me a favor? Poke around your house, look in your garage, search your storage shed, see if you can find some more of the money you stole. And if so, would you mind just giving it back to us? I don't understand any of this, Dean. I know some of this, private company search that is apparently going on has something to do with some behind closed doors hearings being conducted by Chief Judge Beryl Howell. There's been a little bit of reporting about that. She has supervisory authority over the grand jury in federal court in Washington, D.C. Judges don't usually involve themselves in matters of ongoing investigation. So I don't understand any of it. But what I know is that if they're continuing to find classified documents that were stolen by Trump and are being unlawfully concealed, at any number of Trump properties, it feels to me the way you go about obtaining them is through a search warrant, not through letting the target of the criminal investigation hire people supervised by his lawyers who signed a certification previously that you've got them all. We've given them all over after a diligent search. This is a little bit of insanity that I can't explain, but it makes my head want to explode that Donald Trump is being held accountable for exactly none of it.
And is your frustration because no other person in America would be allowed this? The FBI would have immediately gotten search warrants for everywhere once they found some classified documents.
Yes. Now, listen, I know the way it works because I have approved countless search warrants. The government needs to have probable cause to believe evidence of crime will be in a particular place at a particular time. You need to make that evidentiary showing to a judge by probable cause. I get it. And I have to believe that the reason DOJ has not gone about obtaining those search warrants for Bedminster or for Trump Tower or a second warrant for Trump's Florida properties is because they can't develop probable cause to meet that evidentiary standard. If that's not what's holding them back, then it's really just kind of a political calculation that's holding them back. And that spells trouble.
No, and that's interesting. And I'm glad you lay it out there because they might not have even known about the storage place. Think about the case they built to get the first warrant. They get the videotapes, they talk to people, they saw documents moving. So is it fair to say if they really don't have evidence that anything was in Bedminster, they can't go on a fishing expedition? They can't get a search warrant approved?
A judge won't authorize it. And I get that. But here's the thing. We all know Donald Trump has committed any number of crimes, right? And the fact that they're not moving out toward an indictment on any of those crimes leaves me less confident that the reason they're not getting search warrants, which is sort of a lesser step on the criminal justice ladder than an arrest, it kind of leaves me wondering, okay, is it really because they don't have enough evidence or is there something else at play here?
I'm talking with Glenn Kirschner, former federal prosecutor. So, Glenn, we heard from the January 6th committee, Chairman Thompson. Well, I think they might actually have the official vote tomorrow, but it seems very clear they're going to do a criminal referral now, because I don't think he would have said it. I think he was sharing with us the sense of the committee. First of all, before we talk about what might be in it, in the big picture, do you think it's significant? Is it meaningful?
It's significant, it's meaningful, but it's only a suggestion. It's a recommendation, but it's a really important one. When a co-equal branch of government conducts this kind of far-reaching, exhaustive investigation of the crimes of a former president and his criminal associates, and they package up, testimony that was taken from more than 1,000 witnesses, probably, 1 million plus documents, evidence. They package it all up. They hand it off to the Department of Justice with a thoughtful, well-reasoned recommendation that, hey, DOJ, the evidence here supports criminal charges. That's important. Suggestion only, though it may be. It's really important. DOJ will take note. More importantly, DOJ will take all of that evidence, thank you very much, and will continue to build on it.
Do you see any scenario where Donald Trump is not part of the criminal referral?
No, none, zero.
He has to be.
Has to be.
I think, I went through earlier in the week on the show from the motion made by the January 6th committee months ago to Judge Carter, where they put in writing 2 federal statutes that they put in writing that they believe Donald Trump violated, which was obstructing Congress and the fraud in the United States of America. I think that's going to look similar to the criminal referral. I think you're going to see those 2 statutes and maybe more.
And Dean, this is what's mind-blowing. After they litigated that issue before Judge David Carter out in California, Judge Carter made a finding, a ruling that Donald Trump, together with John Eastman, one of his corrupt lawyers, committed 2 federal felonies, as you just said, obstructing an official proceeding and a 371 conspiracy to defraud or commit offenses against the United States. And Dean, the judge made that finding by a preponderance of the evidence, which is more evidence than you need to indict somebody. You only need probable cause. That's why every day my head as a former career prosecutor wants to explode.
I mean, does it come down to, and I think we talked about this offline one time, that Merrick Garland is just become more, his mindset is a judge and no longer a prosecutor.
It seems like, back in the day when he was prosecuting Marion Barry himself, and then when he went on to supervise prosecutions of the Oklahoma City bombing, the Atlanta Olympics bombing, he supervised the investigation into the Unabomber. I think he had his prosecutorial legs up under him, and by all accounts was a really strong but careful, cautious, thoughtful, circumspect prosecutor. And then for a quarter of a century, he was a judge. Those are very different muscles that you're exercising when you're a judge. You have to think deep thoughts. You have to look at it from every angle. You need to engage in some legal navel gazing and ask everybody's opinion before you finally land on the proper resolution. It feels like Merrick Garland these days is too much judge and not enough prosecutor.
I think for judge, as a prosecutor, I'm sure your heart races at times. You're doing something big. As a judge, you must have to be able to bring your blood pressure down and your heart rate down, because there are times it's boring as hell. As someone, you were in court much more than I, but there are cases that just drag on, and judges have to not look bored and sort of bring it down. They're almost one step above comatose, and that's what Merrick Garland seems like at times. Like he's just one step above having to put smelling salts under his nose.
Yeah, judges don't fight crime.
Right.
Judges don't investigate cases. Judges don't approve indictments. What judges do is they think long, hard, deep thoughts, and they try to get complex, often very nuanced and very specific issues of law right, taking in all of the authority that might exist over the past several hundred years. Again, those are very different legal and intellectual muscles that a lawyer is using to be a judge, as compared to having to be a hard-charging prosecutor in a time in our nation's history when our democracy hangs in the balance.
There's few things that when you're a judge, you can be that bring you joy in the court. Like if you're a prosecutor, you get a conviction, you feel good. Or even when I used to cross-examine someone and you expose them as a liar, you feel like you're like, okay, I prepared, there I go, I did that. And the judge just sits there and looks at you. I don't think I'm not in the running to be a judge. I don't think I'd ever want to be a judge if I was in the running to. It's just not my cup of tea. I don't know if you could have ever been a judge.
Well, Dean, it's funny because a lot of the folks that I worked with at the DC U.S. Attorney's Office, in fact, people I supervised and people I tried cases with, have gone on to be judges in both the local court in DC, federal court in DC, both trial and appellate court judges.
Wow.
And I have had people occasionally ask, are you interested? Do you want to put your hat in the ring? And every single time I politely declined. I said, that is just not me. It's also a very insular life. I mean, you're sitting in your chambers with a couple of clerks, and then you walk to a largely windowless courtroom. You sit up on high, donned in a black robe for 8 hours, listening to what? Lawyers argue and carpet one another? And then you go back to your chambers and think deep thoughts? No, not for me. Thank you. I can work on a commercial fishing boat or a horse farm or wash dishes, all of which I've done in my life before I could ever be a judge.
The biggest thrill for the judges, all rise when everyone walks in. That's it. That's the thrill. It's like, yep, that's right. It's me. I would just suck it up. I'd be like, no, nobody's sit yet. Let's check this out. Look around, kind of nod, point at people. Like, hey, like the politicians, like I chatting with Glenn Kirschner. We have to have a little fun with this because we're both losing our mind. Right before we started, I can hear in your tone, and I'm going on vacation next week, which I need. Then the report comes out. Looks like the January 6th report looks like it's coming out the week of December 19th, which is great. I look forward to reading it. So the special counsel, do you think right now we learned a little bit more? Jack Smith apparently issued some subpoenas. Is there any idea of a reasonable time frame for him to complete 2 different investigations in this? I mean, and forget him personally, what would be reasonable? Like, he's inheriting this. He's got to go through a ton of files. It's 2 different buckets. It's the January 6th coup attack and then Mar-a-Lago. Is it 6 months from now? That's reasonable to say we might get a report. Is it 9 months? And he shouldn't have to be expedited in that. He should be thorough, Jack Smith. It's Merrick Garland who was late to the game to appoint him. It's not his fault. He should do a thorough job. What's fair? What do you think? What should we lower our blood pressure to? Should it be 9 months, a year?
Yeah, it's a great point that we do have to give him time, as frustrated as we are. But here's the thing. Every criminal investigation is a fact-specific endeavor. And you don't know, is Jack Smith going to have to return an indictment in, for example, the theft of classified documents case that involves a conspiracy of 10 or 15 or 20 people or more? The reason I say that is because Donald Trump didn't pack up all those documents himself, move them down to Mar-a-Lago, and then conceal them from the government for a good year and a half, criminally so. There are a lot of hands in the mix. So how Jack Smith decides to go about not only investigating, but who he chooses to include in the conspiracy indictment, which I'm confident he's going to return. He's got to return it because that was a big old conspiracy to steal government documents. Those are really challenging questions. You can't put a deadline or a time frame on that. But that being said, I was concerned before a special counsel was appointed that this was just going to prolong things, because I thought, okay, special counsel is going to have to come in and begin from jump, right? That really wasn't what Jack Smith was tasked to do. Merrick Garland said, look, these 2 investigations have been up and running. There are teams in place. We've got a lot of evidence. We've been moving out. Now, you just step in, you continue the investigations moving in the right direction. And boy, it feels like Jack Smith has done that with some of the subpoenas he's issued most recently. So I'm confident that he seems to be the kind of guy who's just going to move things forward. And so, if we had to take a wild guess, this is largely an uninformed opinion, I don't see any reason why we can't have indictments in the theft of government documents case sometime this spring. And then the insurrection maybe shortly thereafter. Look, if it were me, Donald Trump, kind of as Bob Mueller said, would have been indicted upon leaving office, because there are so many crimes that, and I hesitate to say this, Dean, I haven't gone there yet, but can I tell you something that really concerns me?
Sure.
And this has been with me ever since I saw Jack Smith's appointment. Jack Smith was appointed because of a potential conflict or an appearance of conflict. Merrick Garland didn't want to be going after the only announced opponent of Joe Biden. I get that. That's legitimate. That, I think, had to be done. But Jack Smith was told he's only supposed to be conducting 2 investigations. What does that tell us, Dean? What happened to bribery and extortion of President Zelensky? What happened to 10 counts of obstruction of justice as documented by Bob Mueller? What happened to obstruction of Congress? What happened to witness tampering? What happened to avoidable COVID deaths? On and on and on and on. Here's what I'm hoping. This keeps me up at night, Dean, because if the only conflict is, well, we just got these 2 new investigations, we're going to let go all of the crimes that Donald Trump committed while he was in the Oval Office. Now, maybe because the 2 investigations that Jack Smith has now been tasked with were already public, Merrick Garland could announce publicly, special counsel's handling those 2. Maybe the other ones are being investigated under the radar screen. I don't know that I believe these words as they come out of my mouth, but Dean, you do know that Ron DeSantis, God forbid, gets to commit all the crimes that Donald Trump committed while he was in office with impunity if DOJ doesn't get after them.
There's no fiber in my being that makes me think that there is any investigation of Donald Trump's crimes while he was in office, because we don't even have a leak or a hint of a grand jury or anything into that. But I cannot say with any certainty. I'm very thoughtful and detailed when it comes to these things. I never say on my show, Merrick Garland's never going to indict him, or he's going to indict him. I won't say either. I just share my frustration that Donald Trump's not indicted. That's my frustration. It's not, Merrick Garland could indict him. By the way, as a former prosecutor, say Donald Trump got indicted in that one bucket, Mar-a-Lago. Realistically, when would a trial happen in federal court? Would Trump be able to delay it through the entire 2024 election cycle?
Now, here's the good news. You know, you can delay civil litigation till the end of time by taking appeal after appeal after appeal of every run-of-the-mill ruling a judge makes in that civil litigation, what we often call interlocutory appeals, appeals that are taken while the case is still a thing, right? Before it's been completely resolved. You can't do that in a criminal case. Once you're indicted, you don't get to appeal anything, basically, until you are tried, convicted, and sentenced. Then you file an appeal of your criminal conviction. Donald Trump, he might be able to win a little bit of delay here and there, file a motion for a defense continuance, but he can't delay it, a criminal case, the way he can delay civil cases. But that doesn't directly answer the question. How long would a case like this take to get to trial from the time the indictment dropped and he was arraigned on the charges? You know, probably a year is a rough, kind of a rough rule of thumb for a case going to trial. So I think it's doable.
Be great. They can be convicted right in the middle of the Republican National Convention. We can announce it right there. Ladies and gentlemen, the verdict is in. Let's read it here in front of everyone. Gentleman, Glenn Kirschner. So, Glenn, the Trump organization, there were convictions, yet at the same time, it triggered frustration. Because this is a Trump organization. It's not IBM. It's a closely held company. It's 2 little ones. We know Trump runs it all. There are no shareholders. There are shareholders, but it's just Trump and Eric Trump and Donald Trump Jr. And so his company gets indicted and convicted, and Alan Weisselberg, but the guy whose name is on everything, not a charge.
Yeah, so here's the thing, and let's remember when Alvin Braggs, the district attorney for Manhattan, received a recommendation from some really terrific former career prosecutors that, hey, boss, we got the goods. We got enough evidence to indict Donald Trump, and we have enough evidence to convict him. Alvin Bragg said, you know what, let's go against Weisselberg and let's go against the Trump organization, but I reject your recommendation on prosecuting Donald Trump. I still have no reason. I still have no idea how he could have made that decision, because it doesn't sound like it was based on the evidence. So what was it based on? We're still waiting for an answer to that question. And here's the thing that really, again, made my head explode. When the prosecutors argued to the jury in closing, and I quote, Donald Trump explicitly okayed tax fraud, close quote. Okay, you had the evidence up front. You had the evidence during the course of the trial because that's the argument the prosecutor made to the jury. Why didn't you prosecute him? It's because he's president and people are scared, or they're compromised, or they feel like he's above the law, or whatever it is, but it's not right. And it makes a mockery of the rule of law in our country.
It does. And we discussed it on the show, and the frustration of people. You don't need any kind of legal background to understand something that's manifestly unjust, that's deeply in your heart, viscerally, you know it's wrong. And the fact Trump skated through everything and doesn't get even charged, not even one charge, his entire life, but in this window that we've actually cared about. It's remarkable. So last question, because I know you're friendly with some of the police officers who defended our democracy on January 6th. And Michael Fanone, he was on before. We're playing it after you because this week, and he's a former Metropolitan Police officer, beaten to within an inch of his life in a way he could have been killed. They were going to kill him. And they got the Congressional Gold Medal. And the family of Brian Sicknick refused to shake the hands of Kevin McCarthy and Mitch McConnell. And his brother said that, talked about Louis Gohmert presented an American flag flown over the Capitol on January 6th to one of the terrorists to attack the Capitol. And that these people say one thing and then kiss Trump's, literally kiss his ring. As knowing some of these officers, what's your reaction to the Sicknick family and the idea Republicans think they can say one thing and then go there and just shake hands with the police officers as if nothing happened?
That's because these politicians are two-faced, or maybe more than two-faced. And Sicknick's family and the other officers who put their lives on the line that day to protect these two-faced politicians only have one face. And it's a face of decency and honor and justice and public service. That is not Mitch McConnell. That is not Kevin McCarthy. Why would they shake their hands? McCarthy and McConnell haven't risen to the defense of the officers. In fact, in their own ways, many of the Republican politicians continue to push the very big lie that was the motivation for those people to attack those officers. And, unless and until we wrestle the big lie to the ground and hold accountable the people who inspired and incited the attack on the Capitol, we're not going to get where we need to be.
And very last thing, the election deniers endorsed by Trump in battleground states for statewide, everyone lost. But at the same time, and I just wrote about it for MSNBC, over 150 members of Congress who won, Republicans coming in January 3rd, are election deniers. And a bunch of election deniers won statewide in red states. Do you feel, though, better about our democracy now, but at the same time, we can't let our guard down and be less vigilant? And does the prosecution of Donald Trump play a role in burning this dangerous democracy denying out?
I mean, I feel better about the midterm results. It's disappointing that the Republicans took the House, but they barely did. And of course, the Senate actually is more firmly in the control of the Democrats now. I feel slightly better about our democracy because of that, but we have insurrectionists in Congress, and the Constitution says you are disqualified. It just summarily says if you participated in an insurrection or gave aid and comfort to those who did after you took an oath of allegiance to the United States, you are disqualified from serving in Congress. The good news is, I believe, Dean, that when it comes time for these insurrectionists to be sworn in January, you might see some members of Congress take exception with them being sworn in because they are insurrectionists. And that may tee up a battle that we really don't know procedurally how it might play out, but I don't think we've heard the last of that.
Well, Glenn, thank you, my friend. And check out his great, if you're on Twitter still, I know some people have left. If you're on, check out his Twitter feed, or Justice Matters with Glenn Kirschner on YouTube. You will learn a great deal. That's why it's so popular. Glenn, thanks so much for spending some time. I really always appreciate your time and your insight, brother.
Thanks, Dean. Great being with you.
Have a great day.